The call comes on a Tuesday, not a Sunday, when the whole family is together and someone might notice the shake in Serena's voice. Not a Friday, when she could blame exhaustion. A Tuesday, 2 in the afternoon. And the first thing my twin says when I pick up is, "Don't tell Mom." That's how I know it's bad. Here's what you need to understand about growing up as the wrong twin. There was never a moment our parents sat us down and ranked us. They didn't have to. The ranking lived in the small things. Whose school play they mentioned at dinner, whose exam results they framed, whose choices they used as a reference point when they talked to their friends. Serena got the law degree. Serena married Grant at 29 in a venue that required a deposit 6 months in advance. Serena has the house in a suburb with good school districts, a dog named after a president, and a marriage that, until this Tuesday, looked exactly like the plan. I have a studio apartment with exposed pipes, a career in graphic design that my father still calls the hobby, and a relationship that started when I was 34 and stopped needing anyone's approval. Our parents have never once said they prefer Serena. They have also never once asked about my work without following it with a question about whether I'm considering something more stable. You already know which twin I am. So when Serena calls on a Tuesday and asks me not to tell Mom, something shifts in me. Not triumph, I want to be clear about that. There's nothing in my chest that feels like winning. What I feel is closer to grief, and I don't fully understand why until later. She tells me that Grant moved out 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. She's been carrying this for 3 weeks, showing up to family Sunday dinners, answering my mother's questions about how Grant is settling into his new firm, nodding and smiling and passing the roast potatoes, and not one word. 3 weeks. I ask her where he's staying. She says a hotel, then pauses in a way that means she's not telling me the full thing. I don't push. I've known Serena my whole life, and I know she'll tell me the rest when she's ready. And I know the rest is the part that actually explains the shape of this. What she tells me is enough for now. The marriage is over. The house is being valued. And she hasn't called our parents yet because, and this is the part I can't stop thinking about, she doesn't know how to be a disappointment to them. I've been one my whole life. I know exactly how it works. Here's something nobody tells you about twins. People assume the bond is automatic, that because you shared a womb, a bedroom, a last name, you must be closer than ordinary siblings. The truth is more complicated. Sometimes growing up alongside someone means you see them more clearly than anyone else does. And sometimes what you see, the performance, the pressure, the gap between who they actually are and who they've convinced the world they are, is something you're not supposed to name out loud. I never named it. Not once in 15 years. I watched Serena become the plan, and I watched what it cost her, and I stayed quiet. Because the alternative, saying out loud to the people who raised us that the life they had mapped out for both of us was one Serena was surviving rather than living, felt like a kind of violence I wasn't prepared to commit. Even when I could see her fading into it, I kept the observation to myself. And now it's a Tuesday, and she's on the phone, and the plan has come apart at the seams, and she's asking me not to tell our mother. I tell her I won't. Then I sit with my phone in my hand for a long time. Because the thing I didn't say, the thing I'm sitting with right now, is that I'm not surprised. I haven't been surprised about Serena and Grant for at least 2 years. And that means one of two things. Either I've been watching a slow collapse without saying a word, or the collapse was always coming, and there was nothing I could have said. I'm not sure which version of that is worse. What I do know is that we're just getting started. Because the hotel isn't a hotel, and the reason the marriage ended isn't the reason Serena is telling people. And my mother is going to find out on a Sunday, at dinner. And what she says when she does is going to tell me everything I needed to know about why Serena never felt safe enough to fall apart. Let me tell you about our mother. She is not a cruel woman. I want to lead with that, because everything I'm about to say could make her sound like one, and that's not quite right. She is a woman who grew up being told that a certain kind of life meant safety. And she wanted safety for her daughters so badly that she never once stopped to ask whether what she was offering was actually that. She grew up with very little, built something from nothing, married a man who worked hard and stayed and showed up. And in her mind, that combination, education, stability, a good match, a house with a mortgage you could name, that was the whole project. That was love made concrete. She had twins, and she saw 2 chances to get it right. Serena understood the assignment first. I don't mean she calculated it. I don't think it was ever that deliberate. But Serena was always the one who watched our mother's face when report cards came home, who noticed which achievements made her shoulders drop with relief, and which ones she smiled at politely and filed away. Serena learned the language of our mother's approval early, and once she learned it, she never stopped speaking it. I learned a different lesson. I learned that the approval was on a track I didn't recognize as mine. And somewhere around 16, I made the quiet decision to step off it. Not dramatically, no big announcement. I just stopped performing for an audience I'd never signed up for. Our parents called it a phase. Then they called it stubbornness. Then they stopped naming it and just let the comparison do the work instead. Serena never said anything unkind to me about my choices. I want to be clear about that too. She wasn't the villain in my story. But she also never pushed back when our mother held her up as the example. She'd go quiet in those moments, a specific kind of quiet I've spent years trying to decode. And she'd let it pass and we'd move on. And the architecture of who we each were in this family stayed exactly the same. I told myself that was loyalty to our parents. Later, I started wondering if it was something else. If you've been paying attention, and I think you have, subscribe. This is the kind of story that takes a minute to build and then hits all at once. You don't want to miss the second half. Now, Grant. Grant came into Serena's life at 26, through work, which meant he arrived already pre-approved. He was exactly what the blueprint called for. Stable, presentable, professionally ambitious, emotionally, and I say this as someone who spent years having Sunday dinners across from the man, emotionally just far enough away to feel safe. He didn't ask too many questions. He didn't push. He matched the life Serena had built the way a piece of furniture matches a room. Correctly sized, right finish, nothing that asked the room to change around it. My mother loved him immediately. My father shook his hand and said, "Good man," within the first 20 minutes, which in our house was the equivalent of a standing ovation. I watched all of this and I said nothing, because what was there to say? That something about the way Serena laughed around Grant was slightly different from the way she laughed when it was just us? That she was happy, clearly, genuinely, but happy in a way that looked a little like someone exhaling for a long time, rather than someone breathing easy. You can't say that at a dinner table. You can't say that anywhere, really, without sounding like you're inventing a problem to justify your own different choices. So I kept it to myself. Some observations are so specific, they feel like accusations. So you sit on them, and sit on them, and sit. The wedding was beautiful. I was maid of honor. I gave a speech that made my mother cry and made Serena squeeze my hand so hard afterward that my knuckles went white. She whispered "thank you" against my ear, and I could feel that she meant it. Not just for the speech, but for something larger, something we'd never quite put into words between us. I didn't know then what I was being thanked for. I think I do now. Because here's what I've been sitting with since that Tuesday phone call. Serena didn't just live the life our parents planned. She performed it. Convincingly, consistently, for 15 years. And the performance was so good that even I, the person who knows her face better than my own, occasionally forgot I was watching one. The question isn't why the marriage ended. The question is what Serena was holding together, and for how long, and what it cost her to finally let it go. And there's a version of this story where the answer to that question is simply Grant. His choices, his failures, the thing in the hotel that isn't a hotel. But there's another version, and that version starts much earlier, before Grant, before the wedding, before the law degree and the deposit and the dog with the presidential name. It starts with two girls in the same bedroom, learning completely different things from the same set of parents. And I'm not sure yet, but I think that what finally collapsed wasn't the marriage. It was the performance. And it was always going to. Serena tells me the rest on a Thursday, not over the phone this time. She drives to my apartment, 2 hours, no warning text, just a knock at the door at 7:30. And I open it, and she's standing there, with her coat still buttoned and her mascara completely intact, which tells me she has been holding herself together with both hands the entire drive over. I let her in. I make tea. I don't ask anything. She sits at my kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg I keep meaning to fix, and she looks around my apartment with an expression I can't immediately name. Not pity, not the polite performance of interest she usually puts on when she visits, the one where she says things like, "It's so cozy," in a way that means I could never. Something quieter than that, something closer to longing. She says, "I forgot you actually live here." I don't know exactly what she means. I think she does. Then she tells me about the hotel. The hotel is an apartment. The apartment belongs to a woman named Priya, who works in Grant's firm. Not his department, adjacent, the kind of proximity that requires just enough intention to be damning. It has been going on for 14 months. Serena found out not through a message or a receipt or anything as legible as that. She found out because Grant told her. Sat down one evening in February while she was reading on the sofa and told her. Just like that. 14 months. I do the math quietly. 14 months ago, Serena and Grant were at my parents' house for my father's birthday. Grant made a toast. He talked about family. He put his hand on the back of Serena's chair the way he always does. That particular gesture, the one that always read to me as more territorial than tender. And everyone smiled, and my mother refilled his glass first. I'm thinking about that toast right now, and I'm feeling something I don't have a clean word for. Serena isn't crying when she tells me. That's the thing I keep coming back to. She delivers it the way you deliver information you've already processed past the point of feeling. Just the facts, clearly, efficiently, like she's presenting a case. And I realize that's exactly what she's doing. Serena is a lawyer. When something becomes unbearable, she files it. Here's what I want to ask you, and I mean you specifically, the person listening right now. When someone tells you news that should devastate them, and they're completely dry-eyed, does that read to you as strength? Or does it read as something having already broken that we don't have a name for yet? Because I'm watching my sister sit at my wobbly kitchen table and tell me her marriage is over, and she looks, and I hate that this is the word, relieved. Underneath the composure and the buttoned coat and the careful delivery, there is something in Serena's face that looks like a woman who has just put down something extraordinarily heavy. And I don't know what to do with that. I ask her what she wants. Not what she's going to do, not what she's told our parents, not what the plan is. What does she want? She looks at me like I've asked her something in a language she studied years ago and hasn't spoken since. I don't know, she says. I think I forgot to keep track of that. Here's where the pattern starts to come into focus. Not fully, not yet, but the outline of it. Because I'm sitting across from my twin sister, and I'm hearing her say she forgot to keep track of what she wants. And I'm thinking about 14 months, and I'm thinking about February, and I'm thinking about a toast at a birthday dinner, and I'm thinking about a woman named Priya who works in an adjacent department. And the thought that arrives, quietly, without drama, is this. Grant didn't leave the marriage because of Priya. Grant left because Serena was never fully in it. Not Serena the person, Serena the performance. And somewhere in 14 months of proximity to someone who didn't know the script, Grant found out there was a difference. Now, I'm not absolving him. What he did is what he did, and the way he did it, 14 months of it, and then a casual evening revelation while she's reading on the sofa, tells you something about the particular shape of his character that I haven't forgotten and won't. But I'm a pattern reader, and the pattern I'm looking at isn't just Grant. The pattern is a woman who learned so early to be what the room needed that she lost the thread of what she actually was. And everyone in her life, our parents, her husband, the whole architecture of the approved life, everyone benefited from that loss. Everyone except Serena. I'm about to say something I've never said out loud before. Not to Serena, not to our parents, not to anyone. But I think you need to hear it, because it's the thing that changes how this whole story sits. And once you hear it, you're going to start seeing something I spent 15 years pretending I didn't. 8 years ago, at Serena's bachelorette weekend, on the last night, after everyone else had gone to bed, it was just the two of us on a hotel balcony with a bottle of something cheap that tasted expensive because of where we were. Serena said something to me. She said, "Do you ever think we're just doing what we're supposed to?" I knew exactly what she meant. I asked her anyway, because I needed to hear her say it. She looked out at whatever city we were in and she said, I mean, is this what I want or is this what makes sense? And does the difference matter at this point? I sat with that for a long moment, and then I said the thing I have regretted in the specific, quiet way you regret something you can't unknow. I said, "It matters, Serena. It always matters." And she nodded, and she refilled her glass. And the next morning we had brunch with the rest of the group, and she was radiant and excited and completely sealed. And she married Grant 6 weeks later, and we have never spoken about the balcony again. Not once. That is the thing I've never said out loud. Not the words themselves, but the fact that I was there for the moment she saw the door, and I held it open for exactly 1 second, and she chose not to walk through it, and I let her choose. And I told myself that was respect for her autonomy, and not in any way the easier thing for me to do. I'm less sure about that now. Here's the thing about watching someone perform a life from the inside. You become complicit. Not loudly, not through any single decision, just through the accumulation of silences. Every dinner where you didn't say what you saw. Every comparison you absorbed without pushing back. Every time you told yourself it wasn't your place. The silences stack up and eventually they have a shape, and the shape is a cage, and you helped build it by never once rattling the bars. I didn't rattle the bars. I sat in my apartment with the exposed pipes and the wobbly table, and I told myself I had opted out, that my non-participation was a kind of integrity, that I was at least not pretending. But I knew about the balcony, and I said nothing. So when Serena is sitting across from me right now, telling me she forgot to keep track of what she wants, I feel something I can only describe as reckoning. Not guilt exactly, something older, something that has been building since a hotel balcony 8 years ago, and has been waiting very patiently for a Tuesday phone call and a knock at the door at 7:30. I tell her about the balcony. I don't plan to. It just arrives, the way true things sometimes do when the room is finally quiet enough. I tell her that I remember what she said. I tell her I've thought about it more times than I can count. And I tell her that I'm sorry I didn't say this sooner, though I'm still not entirely sure what I would have said or whether it would have changed anything. She's very still when I finish. Then she says, "I remember." 2 words, and the weight of them. She says she remembers the balcony, and she remembers what I said, and she remembers going to bed that night and lying there thinking about the difference, want versus sense, until she'd thought it so far around that it came back to the same place. She says she convinced herself they were the same thing, that what made sense would become what she wanted, given enough time, given enough investment, given enough of herself poured into it. 15 years of enough. And here's the part that stops me completely. Here is the part that I'm still sitting with, days later, because I don't know what to do with it. Serena tells me that the worst part, not the affair, not the house being valued, not the performance coming apart, the worst part is that when Grant sat down on that sofa in February and told her about Priya, her first feeling, before the shock and the anger and everything else that followed, her first feeling was, "Oh, thank God." She puts her hands around her mug and she says it so quietly I almost miss it. "Oh, thank God." Like something had finally made the decision she had spent 15 years not making. Like the collision she had always known was coming had finally arrived, and the waiting, the long, expensive, beautiful-looking waiting, was over. Now I want to ask you something. Specifically you, the person who knows exactly what I mean by a feeling you're not supposed to have. Have you ever been so relieved by something devastating that the relief scared you more than the devastation did? Because that's where Serena is, and that's where I am, watching her. And I think that feeling has a name, but it's not one we use very often, because it requires admitting that sometimes the collapse is the rescue. Our mother still doesn't know. That Sunday is coming. I can feel it the way you feel weather. Not the day or the hour, but the pressure of it. Something in the air that tells you the sky is about to change. And when it comes, it won't just be a mother finding out her daughter's marriage ended. It'll be a woman finding out that the life she built as proof of love was a weight her daughter has been carrying since a hotel balcony 8 years ago, on the last night before everything became official. And I'll be at that table, and I'll know about the balcony. And the question I can't stop turning over is whether I say something this time, or whether I refill my glass and let it pass. Again. The Sunday comes 11 days later. Serena tells our parents herself. She doesn't ask me to be there, but I am anyway, sitting at the table I've sat at my whole life, with the same tablecloth and the same dishes and the smell of the same roast. And I watch my sister do the bravest thing I have ever seen her do. She tells them clearly, no preamble, no softening, no performance. The marriage is over. Grant has moved out. The house is being handled. She is fine. Not fine the way she's always said fine, the sealed and efficient fine, but fine in a way that sounds like it might actually become true eventually. She sits up straight and she delivers it, and she doesn't apologize. My father goes very quiet. He reaches across and puts his hand over hers and says, "Whatever you need." That's it. Whatever you need. And something in my chest unknots slightly, And I think, okay, we're going to be all right. And then my mother speaks. She doesn't shout. I want to be clear about that, because what happens next is worse than shouting. She speaks in the voice she uses when she is trying very hard to stay in control of something. Measured, deliberate, each word placed carefully, like she is diffusing something rather than detonating it. She says, "What did you do?" Not "what happened," not "are you okay," not "I'm so sorry." What did you do? Serena's face doesn't change. And that, the not changing, is the thing I will remember when I think about this night for the rest of my life. Because Serena has been preparing for this specific question her entire adult life. She knew it was coming. She has known the shape of it since a hotel balcony 8 years ago. She says, "I didn't do anything, Mum. It ended." My mother says, "Marriages don't just end, something happens." And here's the thing I've been watching build since a Tuesday phone call. Here's the pattern the audience has been seeing before Serena could let herself name it. Because my mother is not asking what happened to the marriage. She is asking what Serena did wrong. Already, in the first 60 seconds. Before condolence, before comfort, before the most basic reflex of a mother toward a hurting child, the audit has begun. The case for the defense is being requested before anyone has even established that there's a crime. I sit very still. Serena explains, briefly and without excess, that Grant was unfaithful. My mother absorbs this, and the response, I need you to stay with me here, because the response is the whole story in miniature. The response is, did he feel like you were present, do you think, in the marriage? I hear Serena exhale, one breath, barely audible, the kind of exhale that contains everything she has ever not said. And I feel something shift in me, not slowly, all at once, the way you see a shape hidden in a picture and then you cannot unsee it. Because it was never about the plan. I had it slightly wrong this whole time, and I can feel the correction landing now, hard. It wasn't that our mother built a blueprint and handed it to both her daughters, and Serena was the one who followed it. It was that our mother built a blueprint and then stood back and watched. And any time the blueprint showed a crack, the question was always, what did the woman do to cause it? The blueprint was never wrong. The plan was never the problem. The problem was whoever failed to maintain it. Serena has spent 15 years performing a life so perfectly that there were no cracks to inspect. And the moment a crack appears anyway, the moment something happens that she could not prevent and did not cause, the first thing out of our mother's mouth is, "What did you do?" She was never going to win. That's the thing. There was no version of this marriage ending where my mother's first instinct was going to be her daughter's pain. The instinct was always going to be the architecture, the plan, the proof. I open my mouth. For the first time in my adult life at this table, I open my mouth before I decide whether it's my place. I say, "She didn't do anything. Grant made a choice for 14 months, and it wasn't about Serena. And the first thing she needs right now is for someone in this room to ask how she is. Not what she could have done differently. How she is." The table goes very quiet. My mother looks at me. My father looks at his plate. Serena looks at me the way she looked around my apartment. Like she forgot something was possible. Like she's remembering a language she let go of years ago and didn't expect to hear again. My mother says nothing for a long moment. Then she picks up the serving spoon and begins to dish out the roast. And she says, to no one in particular, "Well, we'll figure it out." It is not an apology. It is not a reckoning. But it is the first time in my memory that the conversation moved on without Serena having to absorb the blame for something that was not hers. It's a small thing, I know that. But I've been watching this family for a long time, and I know the weight of small things. I know that a door held open for 1 second can be the difference between a person who gets out and a person who spends 15 more years performing. I said something this time, and I'm not sure yet, but I think that matters. Even if no one at this table will ever say so out loud. It's been 4 months since that Sunday. Here's what has happened in 4 months. Serena has moved into a flat 2 streets from mine. Not temporary, a lease, furniture she chose herself, a kitchen she painted a color our mother described as a lot. She has a therapist. She has been sleeping, she tells me, better than she has in years. Not happily, not easily, but deeply. The way you sleep when you are no longer spending energy maintaining something while you rest. The divorce is being processed. Grant is out of the picture in every meaningful sense. Priya, apparently, is also out of his picture now, which is the kind of detail that tells you everything you need to know about what that was and what it wasn't. Our mother brings food over to Serena's flat on Tuesdays. She has not said she was wrong. She has not revisited what happened at the dinner table, or who said what, or what it meant. She shows up with containers of things Serena likes, and she stays for an hour and she leaves. It is not the conversation that needs to happen, but it might be the beginning of the conditions under which that conversation becomes possible. I'm choosing to read it that way. Not because I'm naive. I know exactly what she is and isn't capable of. But because Serena seems to be choosing to read it that way too, and that choice belongs to her. I'm not going to take it from her by being right. Here is what I've been sitting with since all of this began. I spent a long time thinking my story and Serena's were opposites, that I had opted out of the blueprint and she had opted in, and we had both paid prices accordingly. Hers the weight of performance, mine the quieter cost of being perpetually legible as the wrong choice. I thought the shape of our lives was a divergence, 2 paths from the same starting point moving apart. I don't think that anymore. I think we were both inside the same structure. I just broke against it louder. Serena absorbed it more completely. And the difference between us was never really about courage or clarity or who understood something the other one didn't. The difference was just fracture points, where the pressure became too much, where the crack appeared. Mine appeared at 16. Hers appeared on a sofa in February, 11 days before a Tuesday phone call. Neither of us was free of it. We were just broken in different places. And here's the part that's taken me the longest to land on. I was not a bystander in Serena's story. I told myself I was. I told myself opting out was a kind of neutrality, that my non-participation was clean. But I knew about the balcony. I saw the crack 8 years ago, and I said one true thing, and then I went quiet. I let the architecture stand because dismantling it wasn't technically my job. Very principled of me. Complicity doesn't always look like participation. Sometimes it looks like someone sitting across the table who knows exactly what's happening and decides, very thoughtfully, that it isn't their place. I'm not destroying myself over this. It's not useful, and Serena hasn't asked me to. But I'm holding it, because I think the places we fail the people we love are rarely the dramatic ones. They're the silences, the past potatoes, the hotel balconies where we say one true thing and then close the door and go to bed. What I can tell you is that something is different now between Serena and me. Not fixed. I don't believe in fixed. I think that word asks too much of people. But different. She calls me more. Not with information to deliver, not with updates filed neatly into their correct categories. She calls and says things like, "I saw a film last night that I think you'd hate." And we talk for an hour about why. And somewhere in those conversations, I'm hearing something I haven't heard in a long time. I'm hearing my sister. Not the performance, not the version shaped by the blueprint and the approval and 15 years of making sense. The actual Serena. The one who was on a balcony 8 years ago, asking whether want and sense were the same thing. The one who has been in there the whole time, waiting for the room to get quiet enough to speak. She's getting louder. And that, not the divorce, not the flat 2 streets away, not the kitchen painted a color that is a lot. That is the thing that makes me think something real has changed. Something that matters more than the plan ever did. You already knew the plan was never the point. You just needed permission to trust it. If this story hit something in you, a sister, a parent, a life that looked right from the outside while something else was happening inside, tell me in the comments. Not the general version, the specific one, the thing you recognized. That's the conversation I actually want to have. And if you want to stay in this room, the one where we slow things down and look at them clearly, there's a story waiting for you next. About someone who spent years being the reasonable one in an unreasonable situation. And what happened when they finally stopped being reasonable. The reasonable ones are always the most interesting, when they finally break. I'm Dee. This is Fur by Firelight. Stay warm. I'll see you in the next one.